And I'd like to welcome everybody for coming out in this little bit inclement weather. We've got a nice crowd. And before we get started, I'd like to do the Pledge of Allegiance. The flag is right beside you there, Rich. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I would like to introduce our speaker tonight. We're very fortunate to have Rick Iekel with us. Rich is the former director of the Rochester Airport. He's had 45 years with the airport totally, or
not 45.
35.
About 30.
Okay, 30 years. So he knows all the ins and the outs at the airport, and he's written the history of the Rochester Airport and has some books over here for anybody that would like to buy one. They're $20 a piece, and he'll be open for plenty of questions and answers at the end of the program. So without further ado, Rich.
Good day. Yes, I spent my career at the airport, and once it gets into your blood, it never leaves. My wife will vouch for that. I'm going to start out with something that you might think is a little bit unusual. It's a poem. The reason it's a poem is because the first 10 years of the airport were crazy and very difficult to try and figure out how to talk it. So I've got a poem that kind of will show you, hopefully will give you a taste of it. So I share with you a tale revealed of a patch of land called Britain Field, a story filled with when and why, where early birds had come to fly. Now, early birds were the pilots that flew before World War I, the Great War. Didn't get World War I until we had World War II. To be prepared for what's to come, the city bought land in 21, left it untouched for way too long, while the Chamber of Commerce tried to move things along. You see, it wasn't passengers that spurred the rise of flight, but a faster means of sending mail gave birth to the airport's site. And until the feds were sure to go, the mayor's funding stalled at no. Then Lindbergh landed in 27, and 20,000 people came. Because he was the nation's hero, the mayor's reluctance was now quite lame. But all in all, it was another year for a proper budget to appear. The first hangar, built in 28, and authorizing funds very late, the commissioner's job couldn't be bigger. He needed people, tractors and carts, a Barber green digger. He truly faced a difficult test, only 40 days to do all the rest. And so I'll end my humble verse with Inauguration Day, June 1st, 1928. So it wasn't until April 28th, 1928, that the City Council finally authorized a budget and authorized money to develop Britain Field. Britain Field was an air landing space, one of a number in the community, and it was being used by these early birds. And the city chose it because the federal government said, we are going to have a postal service, and if you want to get your mail by air, you will develop an airport. And so everybody, Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, all the way down the line, immediately found land and got an airport. And then the federal government did its normal thing. It just waited and planned and studied, installed. And the mayor basically said, not until I hear something real. So inauguration day was on June 1st, 1928. The flight carried 100 pounds of mail and had 4 passengers. The crowd that came out was pretty significant. I'd like to read a bit of a report that was commissioned later by the city that it talks about the period between basically April 28th and June 1st. This report indicates work was started on the runways on May 9th, 1928. And by June 1st, 10,000 cubic yards of excavation had been made for runways and trenches. Some 17,000 tons of stone had been put in place, covering an area of about 40,000 square yards. In addition, other incidental work had been done. 4 Keystone gasoline shovels were employed to make the 6-inch cut for the runways. And 30 to 35 teams and wagons were on hand to move the material to the southeast corner of the airfield, where it was dumped and graded for automobile parking. That's a lot of work done in less than 40 days. And I gotta tell you, the commissioner who was in charge of that was, as far as I'm concerned, was a miracle worker. Typical of government, about a year after he had completed it and everything was going fine, one of the councilmen blasted him in the newspaper and told him that he had done a terrible job and he really didn't care and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So 1930 was the official opening of the airport. So we, having been purchased in 1921, it wasn't celebrated until 1930. Now I've been talking to the airport director and I'm saying, we need to have a centennial celebration. I said, for God's sake, it could be anywhere between 21 and 30. Don't wait till 30 because I want to be able to go to it. Back then, the runways were labeled A, B, and C. And if you landed on runway A, you could land either way. And sometimes airplanes did land on both ends at the same time. There were 2 accidents. After the second accident, the second accident involved Ray Highland, a name that some of you may know of. Ray was a porky guy. When I was in school, in college, and my summer vacation came up, I walked up to him and I asked him if I could get a job. And he looked at me and he went, "Do you fly?" I said, "No, sir." He said, "What the hell good are you?" And then after I was assistant manager, he landed his airplane one time and he forgot to put his gear down. So we had an emergency. I drove out to the site. He's standing next to the wing and he says, "Come over here, boy." I said, "Ray, just this once, could you not call me boy?" Anyway, it took quite a number of years before runways were numbered. And that wasn't just Rochester, that was every airport. They didn't figure out that you needed to number them. The number system, if you don't know, a runway that's 28 is actually 280 degrees, so that when the airplane is landing, when the pilot is landing, his compass shows 280 degrees, and he's landing on runway 28. That's how the runway numbers are determined. While we were starting up, with Colonial Western Air, the mail contractor who came in on June 1st. American Airways also started up in some of the other cities. Now, American immediately figured out that there was something more than mail, that the use of the airplane for passengers was going to be coming up. And they decided that they were going to take advantage of that. They immediately started buying out other contractors and eventually came to Rochester, bought out Colonial Western, and they started service here in Rochester, changed their name to American Airlines. They became our first, and still are there, airline at the Rochester Airport. During the 1930s, the city continued to build runways and taxiways and parking areas with the assistance of the WPA, the who knows? Works Progress program. This was a program that funded people, that helped people through the Depression. The Depression was going strongly at that time. This was a job creation situation, and the airport the city took full advantage of it and built additional runways, further developed the airfield, and built a third hangar on the facility. Going back to those couple of accidents, let me show you a picture of this is a result of the second accident. The tiny tower that's next to the concrete one is the first tower that was put into existence on the airport. And that basically came out of a lawsuit that Ray Highland initiated. The airport manager built that, or had it built. It was a situation where a person who was going to be directing the air traffic, or the traffic, whether it's in the air or on the ground, would climb up that center stem and climb into that cabin. But that cabin, by the way, is sitting in the lobby of the airport now. And Sam Cooper, at one point, was driving through Chile, and he saw the cab in a field and recognized what it was. And he resurrected it, got Ray Highland to pay for it. And it was outside of the old terminal building, right near the administration offices, for a long time. I am trying to convince the county to take that tower and relocate it back to its original location, and then at a dedication, make that the centennial situation, the centennial celebration that we have. I'm just in the first stages of trying to get the county to do that, and we'll see what happens. I'll keep you posted. The next picture shows one of the people who is directing the airplanes. This is a stop-and-go gun. The person that's operating this gun is a city employee. The air traffic controllers from the FAA did not come until 1948. So this person at nighttime that gun had red and green lights. The red light shone out like about 4 miles. If an airplane was coming in, hopefully during the day somebody was already up in that tower. At night, usually there was one person on duty. That person would race over, climb up, blink the light green so that the airplane knew to land. And as soon as he landed, he would climb down, go over to the airplane, fuel the airplane, because that's probably why he was coming in, go over to the tower, climb up, and blink that light and let him go again. You don't want to have too many airplanes come that way if you're the only person on duty that way. So the next picture is a picture of what the airport looked like during the next decade. The airport terminal, it shows the airport terminal in 1939. This was the completed hangar number 3, which is located on Scottsville Road. Are any of you familiar with where the hangars are located? There used to be Olympic Park on the riverside. Opposite that, just basically opposite the Olympic Park, the old Olympic Park. For years and years and years, hidden behind a trailer park. And you didn't really get a good look at those hangars until that trailer park was gone. And I was driving past one day after the trailer park was gone, and I saw the history of Rochester. And I said to myself, somebody's got to write that. So I started writing. So the 1940s started out really busy. There were 2 programs going on to have people learn how to fly. One program was the result of the Civil Aeronautics Board and the Air Commerce Act of 1926. It started a ruling for how to operate aviation in the United States. One of the programs that was within that was a program to convince people to learn how to fly. They wanted more people flying. So they were paying people to go to school to learn how to fly, and that really pumped up about the late 30s. Right along the same lines, the Army Air Force, Army Air Corps, was also interested in getting pilots, and they developed a similar program. And Rochester, for several years, had about 1,000 people learning how to fly. That's a lot of airplanes going up and down and up and down and up and down. And they go to ground school, and then in order to get your first private license, you need about 14 hours of flight time. And that's mostly done with landing and takeoff. Except when they teach you how to get out of a dive. I'll divert to that for just a moment. I took flying lessons. My instructor did not tell me that he was going to put me through this exercise. He simply said, pull back. And I pulled back on the column, and we went up. And the airplane is starting to shudder a little bit. And I looked at him, and he says, it's okay. And we went further, and all of a sudden a horn went off, scared the living dickens out of me. He said, that's okay. And all of a sudden, the airplane went to the left like this. And that scared more than the dickens out of me. He took over and just brought it back. And he said, you need to learn how to do that, because if you don't learn how to do that, you'll die. I said, you could have told me what you were going to do. I couldn't do one of those stalls with him again, because every time I started up, I just couldn't continue it. It took a different instructor out in West Bloomfield that taught me how to actually do a stall successfully. During 1945, we also, one of the things that the Army Air Corps offered was, when you got your pilot's license, you also got your ticket to the Army Air Corps for World War II. You're in the Air Force now. So right during the middle part of the 40s, we got 2 more airlines. Robinson Airways was a small airway that provided basically hop, skip, and jump service across New York and Pennsylvania. They turned into Mohawk Airlines that provided a slightly larger hop, skip, and jump service for a lot of years. And then Mohawk became Allegheny Airlines, Allegheny became US Air. And also in 1945, Pennsylvania Central Airways started up. They were basically providing service from the Great Lakes area to Washington, D.C. Pennsylvania became capital in 1960-ish. Capital went bankrupt. United took over, and United continued that north-south route. By the end of the decade, the city realized that they were going to have trouble continuing to be able to finance the airport. The airplanes, the engines were getting stronger, the airplanes were getting bigger, the requirements that were for runways and airfield services was getting larger, and the city basically said, we can't afford to do those kinds of things. It just started to talk about turning it over to the county. On January 1st, 1948, the county took over, and at the price of $750,000 to the city. The county, at that point, want to slip the next one. The county at that point had three major projects that they wanted to do. One was the east-west runway, runway 1028, from left to right. It's a runway it's 5,000-foot runway. It's the runway that when you took off, you fly basically down Elmwood Avenue and past the hospital and into Brighton. People in Brighton didn't like that at all. As probably was true when ultimately when runway 422 was built and the people in Chilai and Gates had the same issues. It was okay with the props and the quiet props, but when we started getting jets, it became an issue. It became much more an issue. It was the noise from the jets was terrible, terrible. So the first thing that they did was the east-west runway, built it 5,000 feet long. Then they took the north-south runway, run 119, they extended that to 5,000 feet. They now had two runways that were long enough for the aircraft, the airlines, and they turned their attention to a new terminal building. This is when they moved from providing the passenger service on Scottsville Road. They built the new terminal on Brooks Avenue. Why don't you move that to the next one? This is the site of the new terminal on Brooks Avenue. If you recall, it came in directly across from Buell Road and off of Brooks and came to a circle in front of the terminal building. The terminal building had a clock tower right in the center that was a highlight feature. The terminal building was a 30,000 square foot building, and the airlines moved from Hangar 3 over to Brooks Avenue, and all of the airline functions started taking place there. So that the Scottsville Road area started to be solely for the general aviation, and it kind of went downhill from there. Next one. I've taken a sketch of the inside of the new terminal, the 1953 terminal. You may, if you're at all familiar with the terminal, you may recognize some of it. If you come in the front door, the area number 4, 5, and 6 was American Airlines, Mohawk Airlines, and Capital Airlines. And then you would go around 3, and you would go out to the where the floor-to-ceiling plate glass windows are, and you go through there and go onto your airplane from there. That very quickly became too small. The community suddenly became very aware of aviation and realized the value of air traffic and air travel, particularly to the major points of New York and Chicago. New York City has always been the major destination for Rochester. Probably 70% of our traffic goes to New York City on a normal basis. Within the course of about 10 years, the terminal suddenly became too small at 30,000 square feet. They nearly doubled it to 60,000 square feet. And at the same time, recognizing that the jet aircraft were going to be requiring a longer runway, they then developed runway 422, which is goes out diagonally from the terminal out toward Gates and Chili. Pretty much the terminal that you see on the picture there is the terminal that we had until we built the building we have now. From 1962 until 1989. There were minimal buildings. United Airlines built on some areas. American built. Each of the airlines built some of their facilities and increased their facilities. But overall, it was that's the building that we had until the terminal that we have now was under construction. I'm going to move ahead now and talk about when I was hired by United Airlines. And I came out of college in 1965, was hired by United Airlines in July, and worked for the airline for about 7 years. This is one of my favorite airplanes, so to speak. I say that tongue-in-cheek. This is a Viscount United Airlines. It was a jet-powered prop airplane with 4 engines. You started the first 2 engines by having an electric cart hooked up and standing between engine 2 and engine 3, and underneath. The first day that I worked for the airline, the fellow said, "Come on out and help me start this airplane." And I'm going, "Okay, yeah." And we're underneath. And first engine started up nice, clean. Second engine started rotating, and it just roar, and there was nothing for about 5 minutes. Just roar. All of a sudden, there was a blast, and a flame shot out of engine number 2, which was that far away from me. About 25 feet back, this flame shot out, and I thought we were going to die. Honest to God, I thought, this is my first day and my last day. The fellow that I was with, as we're walking away from it afterwards, said, "You're lucky, Rick. You had somebody with you when that happened. I was alone the first time it happened to me." I had a second incident with this airplane, which is why I tongue-in-cheek. This is one of my favorite airplanes. I nearly took a trip to Philadelphia in it. I was loading bags of mail. Another fellow and myself had brought the mail up to the airplane. We were loading the cargo area in the back, and he was throwing the bags in, and I was inside pulling the bags and stuffing them up against the bulkhead. And he got done, left a pile there, and he was done, so he just pulled away. As I'm working to try and get that pile put down properly, someone else came along. It was getting close to departure time. They looked in, saw the pile and thought it was the real thing, and closed the door. I went, "Oh God." I'm going to go to Philadelphia. Let me see. I wonder what the agent's going to do when I climb out when we get to Philadelphia. I will be alive. It flies at 11,000 feet, so there will be oxygen. But it's going to be really, really cold. And about that time, the engine started. The first of 4 engines started. And my real brain kicked in and said, do something. I got on my back, put my feet up on the top. Now, the cargo area is only about 4.5 feet from top to bottom. The bottom is circular like this. And I got into a place where I could put my feet on the ceiling, and I started pounding on the ceiling, hoping that somebody in the passenger compartment would hear it and then call the flight attendant over. Fortunately, I'm told, a regular passenger did hear it. He called the flight attendant and said, I've been in this seat a long time and I've never heard this sound. I think you ought to check it. She goes, yeah, I think you're right. I've never heard that either. She went up to the captain. The captain didn't want anything to do with it. They were starting the engine. He wanted to leave. He wanted an on-time departure. She finally convinced him, you really, really, really ought to go. So he, just with I think 3 engines running, he sent somebody around, and they opened up the rear cargo door, and I shot out of there like a bat out of hell. That guy didn't know what hit him. So that was my nearly trip to Philadelphia. I worked for the airline for about 7 years. I got very interested, during that time, I got very interested in airport management. I had read a description of an assistant airport manager. The problem is that with one airport, there's only one airport manager, and in Rochester, there's only one assistant airport manager. So you got a snowball's chance in hell, frankly, of getting into that situation. I made myself known to the airport manager, and I made sure that he knew who I was and where I was. And one day, I was called away from my duties at United Airlines and told to go to the airport manager's office, where I was interviewed and then hired. I didn't realize it, but I was hired on a tenuous basis of maybe we'll keep you and maybe we won't. I was much too naive, and didn't know that I had to pass an exam to do it. But anyway, I went to work for the county on January 1st, 1973. The same day that Sam Cooper started at the airport. He started as manager, I started as assistant manager. There was a shift that day. And here's an example. There were 2 clerks who worked in the office. Sam